Hello everyone, it's me Uncle John. Today I am going to read S5 5080, The Count of Monte Cristo, Chapter 1, A Wicked Plan. On February 24th, 1815, a ship called the Pharaon sailed into Marseille, the largest port in the south of France. People ran to the waterside to welcome it, because the arrival of a ship is always a great excitement in Marseille, especially if it belongs to an owner from the town. A young man was standing on the deck, watching the sails and giving careful orders to the sailor. He was between 18 and 20 years old, tall, with fine dark eyes and fair hair. His calm face showed that danger meant nothing to him. The ship's owner, the Monsieur Morel, could not wait for the ship to arrive in port, and jumped into a small boat. "Take me to the Pharaon," he ordered his men, and soon he was on the ship's deck. "Welcome home, Dantès," he said to the young man. "But where is Captain Leclerc?" "It's very sad, monsieur," replied Edmond Dantès, taking off his hat. "We lost our good captain between Naples and Rome." "And the cargo?" asked the owner worriedly. "It's all safe, monsieur, but poor Captain Leclerc died very suddenly after a short illness. We gave him a sailor's funeral, and there he rests on the Mediterranean seabed. Well, we all have to die at some time, as long as the cargo. All is well with it, monsieur, but here is Monsieur the Danglars, who takes care of that side of things. You can ask him." The owner turned to a man of about 25, with a dark, unsmiling face. The sailors hated him as much as they loved Dantès. "Well, monsieur," said Danglars, "you've heard the bad news." "Yes, yes. Poor Captain Leclerc, a fine, honest man, and an excellent sailor, just the kind of man for an important company like Morel and Son," answered Danglars. "Yes, although it is good to see that Dantès can take the captain's place so well," said Morel, watching Edmond. "Well," said Danglars, looking at Dantès with hatred in his eyes, "he's young and confident, but he made us lose a day and a half by stopping at the island of Elba, for no good reason." "Did he?" replied Morel, surprised. "That was wrong of him. Dantès," he called, "come over here. I'd like a word with you." The young man came closer. "Yes, monsieur," he asked. "I wanted to ask why you stopped at the island of Elba." "Monsieur, I had to obey Captain Leclerc's last order. As he lay dying, he told me to take a letter to the Emperor Napoleon, who was living on Elba, and that's what I did." "Young man," said Morel, "you did well to obey your captain, but perhaps you'll get into trouble for it. The king and his friends will be angry if they hear you have taken a letter to their worst enemy." "I only obeyed an order. Is that all?" "Monsieur, I think the emperor gave him a letter to take to someone in Paris." Danglars whispered in the ship owner's ear. "I saw it. If Dantès has a letter, he'll tell me about it," replied Morel confidently. "Dantès, you are free to go now. Can you come and have dinner at my house this evening?" "Thank you for your kind invitation, monsieur, but the first thing I must do is visit my father. He's an old man now. You're a good son, Dantès, and you have another person to visit perhaps, a lover, the beautiful Mercedes." "We're not lovers, monsieur," the young man replied seriously. "She's my fiancée. We hope to marry very soon." "Well, go now, Dantès, and in 3 months' time, come back to see me. The Pharaon will be ready for the next trip." And Morel put his hand on Edmond's shoulder with its new captain. "Oh, monsieur," cried Edmond in delight, "thank you 1,000 times. It's my dearest wish." And wished this wonderful news in his head, the young man walked quickly away from the waterside and into the narrow streets of the old town. Soon he came to a small house and hurried up the dark stairs to his father's room. Here he spent several hours with his father, making sure that the old man had everything that he needed. Then Edmond hurried out of Marseille toward the fishing village. Mercedes A lovely young girl with dark hair and beautiful soft eyes was standing in her living room, looking dreamily out of the window at the sea. She was thinking of Edmund. Behind her, a tall young woman was speaking to her. Please, Mercedes, he was just saying. Think about our wedding. You know how much I love you. Give me an answer. You've had 100 times, Fernand, the girl replied. I love you like a brother, but my heart belongs to another man. But I have dreamed of being your husband for 10 years. Mercedes, don't take away that hope. Say yes to me. Fernand, I love Edmond Dantes. I will marry no other man. Perhaps he will die. Perhaps he has forgotten you. Mercedes, cried a happy voice outside Mercedes. Ah, cried the girl, running to the door in delight. You see, he hasn't forgotten me, Edmund. I'm here. Suddenly, Edmund and Dantes, Mercedes were in each other's arms. At first, their happiness cut them off from the rest of the world. They saw nothing of what was around them. But then Edmund noticed Fernand, who had a dangerous-looking knife in his left hand. Who is this? Edmund asked Mercedes. He will be your best friend, Edmund, because he is my very dear cousin. This is Fernand. Edmund smiled and put out his hand. But Fernand, his face dark and full of hatred, did not move. Mercedes stepped forward. The Fernand, put that knife away and remember this, she said, her eyes shining angrily. If anything happens to Edmund, I shall kill myself. Now you're going to shake hands with him like a friend. Slowly, Fernand offered his right hand, but as soon as Edmund touched it, he ran out of the house. What can I do? What can I do? Fernand cried wildly. Stop a minute, called Danglars, who was sitting under a tree with a bottle of wine. You look unhappy. Have a drink with me. Without really knowing what he was doing, Fernand sat down on the grass and drank the wine. So your lovely cousin Mercedes has decided, has she? Said Danglars. She's going to marry Edmond Dantes, is she? Yes, I can't stop it, cried Fernand angrily. But you can, if you want to, my friend, said Danglars. Let me show you what to do. Write a short letter to Monsieur de Villefort, the crown prosecutor. In the letter you say that Dantes is an enemy of our king because he's visited the wicked Napoleon on the island of Elba, and even carries a letter from him. You see, it's easy. But if I do that, Edmond will die. Who knows? Perhaps he will go to prison, but what does it matter? You'll have the lovely Mercedes, and to himself, Danglars was thinking, this will stop Antes becoming captain of the Pharaon. Danglars' wicked plan worked well. The next day was Edmond's wedding day. But just as he and Mercedes were getting ready to go to the church, Edmund was arrested. Danglars smiled to himself as he watched the police take the young man away. Chapter 2. Another enemy. Monsieur Villefort was another man who was planning to marry his fiancée soon. As a crown prosecutor, he wanted a wife who would help him become an important person in Marseille. Now that Napoleon was banished, people who had helped him become emperor, like Villefort's own father, were losing their jobs, homes, money, and friends. The Villefort hoped that no one would remember his father's interest in Napoleon. He was clever enough to see that, from now on, only allies of the king would have power and make money, so he had chosen as his fiancée Renée Saint-Méran, who was beautiful and rich, and whose parents loved the king. He was at a dinner party at a large house in the most expensive part of Marseille. When a letter was brought to him, he opened it at once and read it. Aha, he said, this is serious. It seems there are still people who want to bring back the banished Emperor Napoleon. Can that be possible? Said several people in horror. Yeah, this letter tells me that a man called Edmond Dantes has visited the Emperor on Elba and has a letter from Napoleon's allies in Paris. The police have arrested him, and I must go to question him. Poor young man, cried Renée. Don't be too hard on him. I must do what's necessary, dear Renée, but I'll return soon. Renée gave him her sweetest smile as he went out. When he arrived at his office, he ordered the police to bring in the prisoner. As he questioned Dantes, he watched the young man's open, honest face and confident smile. He can't be a criminal, he thought. Rene will be happy when she hears that I have released him. He smiled kindly at Dante. You'll be free man very soon, my friend, he said. I'll just look at the letter that you were carrying. Thank you, Monsieur. Here it is. Looked down at the envelope, and when, white with horror, it was addressed to Monsieur Nortier, his father. He fell back in his chair. Monsieur, are you ill? Cried Dantes. I'm asking the question, not you, said Belfort, trying to think fair. Does anyone else know of this letter? Anyone at all? No, Monsieur, but what's the matter? Can I go now? I'm afraid I must keep you a little longer, but first, I'm gonna destroy this letter, then no one can say you're the king's enemy. He threw the letter on the fire, where it burned brightly for a few seconds. Monsieur, you're a very good friend to me. Now remember, Dante, if anyone asks about the letter, say you know nothing about it. Don't forget. It's important. Yeah, I won't forget, Monsieur. Thank you. Belfort called the police officer to the room and whispered an order to him. Follow this officer, he told Dantes, who smiled gratefully at Belfort as he went out. When he was alone, Belfort put his head in his shaking hand. The letter is gone now, but Dantes read the name and address on the envelope. If anyone learns that my father is still one of Napoleon's allies, I'll lose my job at once, he thought. They could even put me to death. Nobody will find out now. He was taken to a prison cell, police cell, where he waited for several hours. Then, to his great surprise, he was taken to the port by 4 large policemen carrying guns. They pushed him into a small boat, which they started rowing out to sea. What's happening? Monsieur Belfort promised he would release me. We don't know anything about that. We're just obeying an order, but where are you taking me? Haven't you guessed? Look around you. Dantes lifted his eye and suddenly saw a frightening black shape right in front of the boat. It was the Eiffel Castle on a small rocky island. It was well known to everybody in Marseille as a prison. No prisoner ever left it alive. He cried out in horror. My God, the Chateau de Div? Why are we going there? The policeman just smiled and continued rowing. But that's a prison for the worst criminal enemies of France. You can't take me there. I've done nothing wrong. So then the boat touched the rock, and the policeman carried Dante, was fighting and shouting wildly into the castle. Soon he found himself alone in the dark, sitting on the ground cell. He could not understand what had happened, and he felt that he was going mad. As Belfort was returning to the Saint Méran's dinner party, he was stopped in the street by a beautiful dark-haired girl. Please tell me where Edmond Dantes is, Monsieur, she said, her voice breaking with sadness. I can't tell you that. He's a criminal, replied de Villefort, coldly, pushing Mercedes to one side. For a moment, he felt worried about Dantes. To keep himself safe, he had sent an honest young man to prison for life and destroyed any hope of happiness for Edmond and his fiancée. He knew that he had the power to put matters right, but the moment passed and he did nothing. The next day, de Villefort traveled to Paris to tell the king that Napoleon was planning to escape from Elba. He hoped the king would be grateful for this information and reward him richly, but he was unlucky while he was at the palace. News of the emperor's escape was brought to the king, and the king was now too busy worrying about his own future to think about rewarding the crown prosecutor. In the next 2 weeks, many Frenchmen hurried to join Napoleon's army as he moved northward, and finally the king had to leave Paris for a safer country. Napoleon became emperor again. Now Belfort had to be careful if he wanted to keep his job. People knew that he had spoken against the emperor. Renée Saint-Méran was no longer the right wife for him, and his plans for a wedding were soon forgotten. Monsieur Morel, the owner of the Pharaon, asked him repeatedly about Dante. He always pretended to be warmly interested in Edmond, but sadly unable to help. He hoped that no one would ever find out about the terrible thing that he had done. A friend in prison. On June 18th, 1815, Napoleon lost the great battle of Waterloo, and in the end was sent back to prison and then banished to the island of St. Helena, where he stayed until his death. The king returned to Paris. De Villefort married Renée Saint-Méran, and feeling perhaps that people in Marseille knew too much about him, he moved with his wife to Toulouse, another town in the south of France. Danglars and Fernand whose plan had put Edmund in prison, were afraid that he would come back to take his revenge one day. So they both left Marseille. Danglars went to live in Spain, and Fernand joined the French army. Edmund's father died soon afterward, and kind Monsieur Morel paid for the funeral. Now Mercedes was all alone. She spent her days crying for the young man she loved so dearly, with no hope that she would ever see him again. A year after the king's return to France, the prisoner inspector came to visit the Chateau d'If. Governor welcomed him to the prison, saying with a smile, "I'm afraid the prisoners will all tell you the same thing. They're innocent and they want to be free, but we have got two interesting prisoners, one mad and one dangerous." "Well, I'd like to see them before the others," said the inspector. Taking two guards with them, they went down to the underground cells in the darkest and coldest part of the prison. "This is the dangerous one," whispered the governor as the guards unlocked the door of Edmund's cell. The young man jumped up in delight when he realized an inspector was visiting him. "At last, monsieur. Now you can help to get me out of here, because I'm innocent of any crime." What did I tell you? What did I tell you?" whispered the governor. "Leave it to me, young man. I can't promise anything, but I'll see what I can do." As Ante was thanking him gratefully, they left his cell. "This is the mad one," whispered the governor. Opened another door. "He's an old priest who thinks he has some treasure hidden somewhere. He'll offer you money to help him find it." When they entered, they saw an old man sitting on the floor who spoke to him at once. "How lucky you have come. I have something very important to tell you. Here it comes," whispered the governor to the inspector. "There's a lot of treasure waiting for me in a secret place. And if you help me, I'm ready to give you a large part of it." "You know your prisoners well," said the inspector to the governor. "To the priest," he said. "I'm sorry, father, I can't help you." "Well," replied the priest angrily, "if you don't want my treasure, then I shall keep it. Goodbye." Turned his back as the governor and the inspector left his cell. Edmund lived in hope. Surely the inspector would help to set him free. But when nothing happened, and the weeks became months and years, he was more miserable than ever. He knew that he was innocent, but he feared he would have to stay alone in this dark cell for the rest of his life, and he was only 19. He lay awake on his hard bed, but one night, as he lay awake on his hard bed, he heard a noise in the wall next to him. He listened carefully. "It's another prisoner digging a tunnel," he thought excitedly, using pieces of a broken plate. He soon began to dig. Suddenly a stone fell out of the wall. Gray head appeared in the hole. "Where's the priest?" Father Faria. He had dug a tunnel all the way from his own cell to Edmund's. Now a much happier time for Edmund began. He could visit Father Faria when he liked, using the tunnel, and together they discussed all kinds of things. Over the years, the priest taught Edmund everything he knew, all about plants and natural medicines, about languages and the way of life in different countries, and about famous writers from the past. Soon they loved each other like a father and son. Sometimes the priest talked of his secret treasure, which he said was hidden on the island of Monte Cristo. But Edmund always replied, "Your teaching is the only treasure I want, father." Had another reason to be grateful to the priest, because Father Faria, after listening intelligently to the story of Edmund's arrest, was able to explain why it had happened. "You see, my friend, Danglars wanted your job as capital of the Pharaon. Fernand wanted to marry Mercedes, and Villefort, well, he just wanted to save his own skin. His father, Monsieur Noirtier, was one of Napoleon's close allies. He knew that you'd seen the old man's name on the envelope that you brought with you from Elba. These three wicked men are your enemy. They are the ones who sent you to prison. I'll take my revenge on them one day," said Edmund angrily. "They'll be sorry for what they did to me." Many years passed in this way, but then one day, Priest became very ill. Just before he died, he gave two yellowish pieces of paper to Edmund. "These tell you how to find the treasure on the island of Monte Cristo. It is yours now, and my boy, find it and use it well, and remember me." The night he died, with Edmund sitting sadly at his bedside. Next morning, when the guards found the old man dead, they put him in a sack. Edmund, who was in the tunnel, heard one of them say with a laugh, "We'll take him to the graveyard tonight." Suddenly, Edmund thought of a way of escaping. When they had gone, he took the body out of the sack and put it in his own bed in his cell. Then he returned to Father Faria's cell and lay down inside the sack on the old man's bed. He worn it there all day. The night the guards returned, they picked up the sack, which was surprisingly heavy for a thin old man. Carried it outside, Edmund could hear them laughing as they tied something to his feet. He could smell the salt in the air. He heard the sea crash against the rock. Perhaps the guards would start digging soon. But then they picked him up, one at his head and one at his feet. 1, 2, 3. They counted and let go of the sack. Flying through the air, pulled down by the heaviness and feet, with a crash he fell into frighteningly icy water, which closed around him. The guards had thrown him over the castle walls, with large stones tied to his feet. The sea was the graveyard of the Chateau d'If. Chapter 4. Luckily, Dante was carrying a knife in his hand, and he managed to cut the sack open, but the stones tied his feet were still pulling him downward, so he searched for the rope and cut it. Then he swam and powerfully upwards, and his head came up out of the water. He went down again at once and swam under the water for 50 meters. When he came up again, he saw a black cloudy sky above the black stormy sea around him. Behind him, blacker than the skyward sea, stood the castle on its rock. And on the castle walls, he could see the shapes of 2 men looking down over the sea. Perhaps they had realized it wasn't a dead body that they threw over the walls. Dante thought. He swam underwater a long way. When he came up again, he couldn't see the guards anymore. He went on swimming in the darkness, and when his foot hit a rock, he realized he was on land. Although strong wind was blowing and rain was falling, he was very tired and he fell asleep on the beach. When he woke up, he realized he was on Tiburon, a small island where no one lived. He noticed a small fishing boat in the water near the rocks. He tried to warn the sailors, but clearly they could not steer the boat away from the danger. There was a terrible crash as the boat hit the rocks. As Edmund watched in horror, 4 sailors fell into the water and were not seen again. Little by little, the wind died away and the sea became calm, but sky appeared between the clouds, and it was morning. Soon the guards will know that I have escaped, thought Dante. Then the police and customs officer will search the coast and all the islands. Where can I hide? Oh, God help me. Just then he saw a small ship coming towards Tiburon. They are probably smugglers, he thought. I pretend to be one of the sailors from the fishing boat. Then I'll be safe with them for a while. Jumped into the sea and swam powerfully towards the ship. Captain saw him in the water. Ordered his men to help into the ship. Gave him food, water, and drank. Where do you come from? I'm a Maltese sailor. Our boat broke up in the storm last night. My poor friends are all dead. Do you know the coast and the ports around here? Yes, I've been sailing these seas all my life. Well, perhaps you'd like to stay with us. Work for me on this ship. I need someone like you. Just then they heard a loud bang from the Chateau d'If. What's going on there? Cried the captain. A prisoner probably escaped last night, said Dante, smiling. That's the warning gun. The captain looked quickly at Dante, but the young man seemed very calm. The captain did not think it would possibly be the escaped prisoner. I'd like to work with you, Captain. By the way, what's the date, the year? You don't know what the year is? I was so frightened by last night's storm, I nearly went mad. I've always forgotten my own name. Well, today's date is February 28th, 1829. 14 years before to the day the police had arrived Dante, he had entered the chateau. 19 and after that 33. Sadly, he wondered what had become of Mercedes. Then, with the light of hatred in his eye, he thought of the revenge that he would take on his enemy, Danglars, Fernandez, and de Villefort. For the next 3 months, he worked with the smugglers, helping them sit in out of the ports along the coast. With a cargo of gold, jewels, tobacco, and other expensive things, they kept away from the customs officer, who often followed them and shot at them. One day, the captain said to Dante, "Well, my Maltese friend, tomorrow we are taking on a cargo of silver and tobacco from another ship at the island of Monte Cristo." Edmond tried to stay calm. "How long will we stay there?" he asked. "You would have time to search for the treasure? Only a few hours." It was an exciting moment for Edmond when the ship arrived at Monte Cristo that evening. It was a hilly island, and its rocks were turning pink and blue in the light of the dying sun. As the smugglers jumped onto the beach, Edmond took a gun, telling them he was going to shoot a wild goat for supper. He managed to shoot a goat and give it to the sailor to cook over a fire on the beach, but as he walked away, he seemed to catch his foot on a rock. Fell heavily. With a loud cry of pain, the sailors came running to help him, but told him he was too badly hurt to walk. They would have to leave him on the island for the night and return to pick him up the next day. They agreed. In an hour's time, they sailed away with a new cargo. As soon as they had gone, he jumped up on a flat stone near the fire, put together 2 pieces of paper that the priest had given him. Taking a burning stick from the fire, he went up the hill, found the 20th rock. Under it, there was a large stone with a ring in it. Before he tried to lift it, he looked all around, but no one was watching. He pulled the ring as hard as he could. Very slowly, the heavy stone moved, uncovering a hole in the ground. The caves, he thought in delight. He climbed down into the hole and found himself in a kind of underground room. And there, in the darkest corner, was a large wooden box. He hurried to open it and fell back when he saw what was inside. It was full of shining gold coin, bright jewels and valuable silver. It was indeed treasure. Next morning he was ready with his pockets full of gold. When the smugglers came to pick him up, he asked them to leave him at the port of Marseille. Here he bought a fast-sailing boat and returned to the island alone to fetch the rest of his treasure. And when he sailed back to Marseille again, he was one of the richest men in the world. An English gentleman, Dantes, bought himself an English passport in the name of Lord Wilmore. He dressed in expensive clothes and put on a grey wig. When he saw himself in a mirror, he knew that nobody would recognize him. He went immediately to the house where his father had lived, but it was empty, so he bought it for 25,000 francs. That evening, he visited a fishing village near Marseille. He stayed for an hour at a poor sailor's house, asking for news of several people who had disappeared about 14 years earlier. Next day, the man got a new fishing boat, a present from Lord Wilmore. Now, Edmund had found out what he wanted to know. His poor father had died soon after hearing that his son was in prison. She confident that Edmund was innocent. Boulevard Danglars were now living in Paris. Danglars had made a lot of money as a banker in Madrid and was now a baron. Fernand had also done well as an army officer in France and Greece. He was now a rich gentleman and called himself a Monsieur de Morcerf. Morcerf waited over a year for Edmond to return, and then, miserable and lonely, she had agreed to marry Fernand. She was now Madame de Morcerf with a son called Albert. It was painful for Edmond to think of her in Fernand's arms. Lord Wilmore's next visit was to an important banker in Marseille. Monsieur, I work for the Thomson and French Company in Rome. Morel and son of Marseille owe us 100,000 francs. We have heard they are in serious difficulty. The banker was glad to help. I think the best person to give you information is Monsieur Bourville, the prison inspector. Morel owes him money, too. He lives opposite the church. When Lord Whitmore arrived at the Bourville's house, he recognized the inspector as the man who had visited him in his cell in the Chateau d'If, but his English disguise worked well, and the inspector did not recognize him at all. Monsieur, said Bourville, when he was asked about Morel and son, you're right to be worried. Morel owes me 200,000 francs, and if the Pharaon does not return in a week's time, he will be unable to pay me back. I'll pay the debt for Morel, of all the Englishmen. My company doesn't like bad debts. There was a look of delight on Bourville's face as Lord Wilmore paid him. Is there anything I can do for you, monsieur? Just tell me you're the prison inspector, I understand. I used to know an old priest in Rome who died in Chateau d'If. Oh, yes, Father Faria, he was mad. Poor man. Was there a young man in the prison at the same time? Yes, Edmond Dante. He died while trying to escape. I see. Thank you, monsieur. Went to see Morel. He found the shipowner at his desk, looking gray and old. Monsieur, I come from the Thomson and French Company. I'd like to inform you that I have paid off some of your debts. How much do I owe you, your company? Wife, he had no idea that he was in fact talking to his old friend, Edmond Friend. 300,000 francs. I don't think you will be able to repay me, said Wilmore. No, monsieur, I haven't got the money. Just then a beautiful 16-year-old girl ran in, crying, Father, bad news, the Pharaon is lost. Morel looked at her in horror. And the captain, Julie? The man, are they all safe? Yes, all safe, but the ship was wrecked in a storm and the cargo is lost. Morel put his head in his hand. Thank God the men are safe, but I'm ruined. The Englishman stepped forward. Let me give you 3 months to find the money. Monsieur, I'll be back here at 11 o'clock on September 5th for you to pay me what you owe me. You're very kind, monsieur. On his way out, the stranger met Julie on the stairs and said to her, you get a message from someone called Sinbad the sailor. Do what the message tells you. Promise me. I promise, monsieur, said Julie. Wonderingly, the 3 months passed, and Morel had found no way of paying the Englishman. His wife had written to their son, Maximilian, asking him to come home from the army for a few days. She was so worried about her husband on September 5th. Mary ate no breakfast and went to sit in his office alone, just feared the worst. She knew her father kept the gun in his desk. When Maximilian arrived, he went to see his father. Father, what has happened? You're an honest man, my son. So you'll understand I owe money that I can never repay. I cannot go on living. Father, let me die with you. Then who will take care of your mother and sister? Promise me that you will not kill yourself. I promise, father. His father to say goodbye and then went out of the room. Morel, alone again, looked at the clock. 2 minutes to 11. He picked up his gun and put it to his head. Just then Julie ran in, waving a red purse and some paper. Father, stop! Got a message from someone called Simba the sailor, asking me to fetch this purse from the house. And inside, look, here are your debts all paid. You owe nothing. Suddenly they heard shouting outside the street. The veteran is arriving. Morel and Julie ran out of the house and down to the pole where they found a large crowd. I don't understand. I thought the veteran was wrecked. This is wonderful. Tall man, wearing a gray wig, smiled as he watched from behind the building. Be happy, Morel. Now I have repaid you for your goodness in the past. Sinbad the Sailor in early 1838. Oh, the end.